Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome to this series of lectures on modern European history. And today we are talking about fascism in Europe. I have earlier spoken to you, and this is the sequel of that discussion. We are restricting our discussion to the theoretical part of fascism. And as a caveat, let me add that when we say fascism in this lecture, it conveys a much larger sense, and it is not only restricted to the phenomena that was witnessed in Italy in the name of fascism between the two world wars, but also it includes the experience of Nazism in Germany and also Bolshevism in Russia. So it is that omnibus of totalitarian regime that was seen to be emerging during the interwar period that we are concerned about. Of course, in the previous lecture, I have spoken to you about the pitfalls of clubbing them together under totalitarian regime, and that is what the conventional historiography has done. The stereotypical imageries that we have, or the stereotypical understanding that we have based on our school textbooks and even beyond of fascism, Nazism and Bolshevism, is because it was presented to us as an inextricably linked phenomena that could better be understood in terms of the attributes of a totalitarian regime. Of course, now we understand that they had their own specificities, and the new approach that seems to be emerging over the last 3-4 decades tries to move away from that kind of generalization. Nevertheless, they also tend to make some or attempt some theory building out of the experience of fascism in Italy, Nazism in Europe and Bolshevism in Russia. And as I discussed in the earlier part of my interaction, that it is fraught with problems, all right, but it also gives you some advantages. Theory building does give you some advantages, and you can deploy that theoretical understanding in a different timeline, in a different context, to understand the possibilities or dangers of this phenomena recurring. Right. So if preconditions are there, you can think that maybe that something like that is about to happen, or you can simply dismiss the possibilities of this because of the absence of the essential prerequisites when we have this kind of a well-knit theory of fascism in Europe. So this particular lecture is over and beyond the stereotypical presentation of fascism, Nazism and Bolshevism. It is this particular lecture is more about the recent approaches, and this recent approach I just told you seeks to build a general theory of fascism. So what are the building blocks for this general theory of fascism? And as I said, that when you say fascism, please understand it as inclusive of Nazism and Bolshevism. So the first attribute you can say of this theory of fascism, this phenomena that got witnessed in the interwar period between the two world wars in Europe, that it was an attitude towards life that was based on a national mystique. Now, one can say, what do we mean by this attitude towards life? One is that it digs into the cultural meaning. It digs into the cultural, you can say, repository that these countries had, and the entire imagery, the entire cultic you can say, cultic control exercised by the leaders of fascism, Nazism, and Bolshevism. They dug into the cultural repository of their countries, their histories, and picked up elements that synchronized, you can say, that struck with the people in the interwar period. Just think of it this, Germany is a vanquished power, so is Italy, and therefore some kind of gloomy, you can say, environment, gloomy air is round the corner in these countries. And this is not so, although France had also been struck very badly on account of the First World War, although it emerged victorious. So there was some stress on the French politics, French liberal politics or democratic politics immediately after the First World War as well, but the sheer fact that it had emerged victorious, so there wasn't that specific situation of fall and gloom that typified French politics or French mentality or French public perception in the 1920s. But these countries, Italy and Germany, to be precise, were under a different kind of psychological setup. And it is in this setup that you have a new kind of ideology that gains a fair degree of support, acceptance, and mass compliance. And this is wrong to say that to begin with it was all as a consequence of terror techniques or propaganda, as is usually highlighted in the stereotypical presentation of fascism. So what we are discussing here is that there is fair degree of consensus which is voluntary to begin with. After a point of time, certainly people realize that there is something else that is at work, but by that time it was too late, and so they had to bear the brunt of it, the dictatorial tendencies. But to begin with, certainly it presented to the people, to the fallen people of Italy and Germany, a new attitude towards life, and thereafter it doesn't quite carry it into some concrete social and economic tangibles, but it dovetails into some kind of a national mystique, and this national mystique again is a 19th century byproduct. So there is a history to it. It's not a new invention, it's not a new manufacturing, rather they are going back to, they are leveraging this ideology. This new attitude towards life is leveraging the anti-democratic and anti-representative or anti-parliamentary forces that had articulated in some way or the other all through the 19th century Germany and 19th century Italy. So they are historically rooted, they are real. Those tangents, those ideas, those sensibilities, those political tangents are very real, and it's not artificial manufacturing that they are doing as a consequence of terror and propaganda. So that is something that we need to be mindful of. Similarly, that accentuation of national sensibilities is again not a new product in 20th century. National sensibilities were very much there in the 19th century Europe, and as we move further, we will see that this charm for national or community and so forth, or unity or coming together, got a fair degree of reception on account of the fact that the other two options available to the people of Italy and Germany were socialism and finance capitalism. And First World War, the defeat in the First World War for these two countries had in fact disenchanted them from a very vulgarized notions that surrounded the politics of capitalism in the 1920s, and the same holds true for the politics around socialism. So these were the two options available to them, apart from the democratic functioning of the state, representative politics and so forth. They had discredited themselves. In fact, some authors say that these leaders, these dictatorial leaders like Mussolini and Hitler, didn't quite have to fight against democratic regimes. This transition in Italy and Germany was not mediated through any civil war, as was the case in the case of Bolshevik revolution. So they just came and they were accepted. So it was somewhat easy for them, because the people at large were ready to receive such kind of an attitude towards life, and that is what we will talk about. So in this national mystique, they dug deep into some of the symbols, some of the cultic imageries drawn from their immediate past of 19th century history, so that they are very real, they appear very real to and viable to people, and it involved exteriorizing the signs of true inner allegiance. So this is very personalized. It is different from socialism, and it digs deep into your individual emotional ethos, and it seeks to display it outwardly. And this itself was a 19th century legacy. When Jacobins wore their red caps and breeches instead of trousers instead of breeches, which was regarded as aristocratic, they were doing the same. When the working class people all across the 19th century, particularly from the second half of the 19th century, were celebrating May Day, or they were doing some other festivals and so forth, they did use insignias, they did use the clenched fist imageries and so forth, which were outward signs of some kind of an inner allegiance to the new ideology. So again, it is not new to 20th century that we are talking about. This new attitude of this new attitude towards life is actually not new. Rather, it is drawn from the immediate past. Similarly, as the second attribute of this recent approach to understand fascism is that it was a revolution that attempted to find a third way between Marxism and capitalism. Now, what is it that we are talking about? In the previous lecture, I had spoken to you about this, that after the First World War, the options available, apart from the liberal politics, or even whatever they were seeing as part of the politics of representative democratic institutions or parliamentary functioning of the state, the ideologies available to them were only two. One is the socialist oriented Marxism, which was regarded as materialistic. I had told you about this, that the vulgarized notion of Marxism was what they were seeing. Similarly, they also looked at capitalism, which was in the finance stage of capitalism. There are three stages of capitalism. You have merchant stage, or commercial stage of capitalism, then you have industrial stage of capitalism, and this is after 1870s. It is by and large financial stage of capitalism that was at play in the early part of 20th century. And even in the working of capitalism, the people at large saw some kind of a soulless positivist unfolding of profit making and individualized politics, and that's it. So in either of the cases, in Marxism, it is the materialist Marxism, fraught with the problems of class struggle. Everything is articulated in terms of a class, and there is no unity, there is no semblance of unity to be had. Now, just look at it. So, be it Marxism, be it capitalism, there is some sense of alienation that is felt by the people at large, and the idea of nationalism, which is again a 19th century accompanying ideology alongside capitalism and Marxism, that gives them fair degree of succor, and that is very interestingly woven into the ideology of this third way, or in the case of Germany or social democracy, it is the Third Reich. In fact, the semantics of it also becomes very interesting. There is some kind of a millenarial connect with this. So, whenever you invoked nationalism in this new way or in this third way, there is a tradition there. There is a tradition, there is an existing tradition to latch on to. This was there is no you can say cognate of this third way in Italian politics, but in Germany there is this strong tradition of third way, and this third way was very individualized. It was mystic, so mysticism is associated with it, and therefore it is while it I mean in 20th century this third way did fire the imagination of progressives. It fired the imagination of the young people who were pro change. At the same time, it worked as some kind of an inhibitive factor as well, because it was all mounted on an pre-existing ideology which is traditional, which is drawn from the tradition of Germany, right? And therefore, there is fair degree of traditionalism also embedded in this otherwise you can say progressive looking ideology of the third way. So, what happens is that while framing this third way, which is a new attitude towards life, there is no tangible, viable economic and social plan that is presented to the people. By and large, the bourgeoisie in Germany were benefiting from this. The industrial production went. There was no, you can say, there was no contradiction, very unsurmountable kind of contradiction there. But what I am saying is that there is some kind of retreating of their economic and social change into an ideology that is traditional and that is mired in in nationalism, right? So there is an inbuilt, you can say, suppressors of the possibilities of this movement acquiring a very progressive overtone. Maybe in future they would have had to deal with those possibilities, but somehow historically it didn't last long. Now, as I was talking to you about this, now you can see it on your slide, this effort encouraged activism. So, in order to get popular support and consent, these ideologies or this third way actually encouraged activism. Activism, as is very evident, is like fighting against the existing order of things. So, it did fire young men's image, and there is a deliberate mounting of young imagery on fascists or Nazists. And even in terms of participation, real participation of people, young people were brought in, were made welcome in this transformation. The imagery of war, although they had been vanquished, although they had been defeated, but it was celebrated. It was presented in a very, it was presented with lot of elan. This is, please be mindful of the fact that this is also the first war in Europe of this scale that was fought in an era where public photographs were also available through cameras. So, the state or the leaders had new levers of social control, and they are using it with a fair degree of imagination to control public imagination. And so, this is not getting dovetailed into a class aspiration of one particular or aspiration of one particular class the way it happened in socialism. It is across the class. Its appeal is across the class. And therefore, it prevented it getting into conflict with the bourgeois desire for law and order, and also from a conflict situation with the head of the state who represented the old order. So, this inbuilt traditionalism is important to understand. Then it could create a consensus, however fragile it might have proven in history, across classes, because it annexed and focused on hopes and longings of the previous century, and I have at length spoken about it not only in this interaction but also in the previous interaction that I had with you on this topic. You can dig into that to make a sense out of it. Now, over the 19th century, scraps of romanticism, liberalism, new technology, and even socialism, all these scraps got mounted by the mantle of a community conceived as sharing the national past, present and future, a community which was not enforced but natural, genuine, and with its own organic strength and life, which is analogous to nature, and therefore the symbols chosen are trees that grow on their piece of land, which they identify as their own, the ruins of past, which they all served as favorite symbols, and they all got identified. So they identified with them. So they are real imageries and not manufactured ones. So it is going beyond a mere appeal to vested interest, as was the case with both, be it capitalism or socialism. Fascism got meat and substance from the real social and economic factors, like the Great Depression, the post-war situation, and so forth, over which was grafted the fascist new attitude towards life, which we have already discussed was not new, and suffused cultural factors and utopia on this, and this elicited real people's participation. It was the only mass movement in the interwar period that could claim to have a cross-class following, and therefore this is something novel about it, and this goes to get an understanding of fascism little bit more nuanced than what otherwise have been projected as part of the stereotypical or traditional portrayal of fascism. Thank you.